This episode is brought to you by MeUndies. While MeUndies can't totally help your love life this Valentine's Day, they can offer you insanely comfy undies and loungewear to buy or gift. MeUndies has so many awesome Valentine's Day prints and styles. Plus, you can match with your partner, friends, or even your pets. This Valentine's Day, give the gift that'll keep them thinking of you and score huge site-wide savings at MeUndies.com/Spotify. That's MeUndies.com/Spotify. MeUndies. Comfort from the outside in.
Welcome back to another exciting edition of the Pointless Exercise podcast. We're a good 3 weeks into the season. So with me to talk about all things baseball is Bally Senior MLB writer David Brown. David, how are you?
Hi, Andy. I'm feeling rushed because everything has a pitch clock now.
That's right. I don't know if you watched any of the scintillating Cubs-A's game this afternoon.
I've seen highlights. Yes. I didn't watch.
Did you hear the Mark Kotsay highlights? He said some naughty words that were broadcast out over Marquee and NBC Sports Bay Area.
Oh.
So Aledmus Diaz got rung up for a pitch clock violation. I guess a batter clock violation.
Right.
And I don't know. It was like a 2-2 pitch. Or it would have been a 2-2 pitch. And Aledmus had, I think he just hit a foul ball funny and he had hurt his thumb. So He had backed out of the box to attend to his thumb. And the old clock kept ticking. And when he got rung up, Mark Kotsay came out and was explaining it using words that started with B and ended with shit. And words that started with F. And we got to hear it all. It was pretty good.
Well, I'm glad somebody is, or glad isn't the word, but I'm not surprised that somebody is getting mad at when baseball things happen, and these pauses come up. I think maybe we've discussed in the past some players having reservations about, like the Trout Ohtani at bats in the WBC, that weren't subject to the pitch clock, that you let the play breathe a little bit more. But there's also things like this where somebody will, you'll get a stinger on your hand from a foul ball or something, and you'll need a little bit more time. And again, I asked this when they put in the pitch clock rules. Why couldn't the umpires just keep the game moving in the first place? I mean, it should be within their purview, and again, here with more rules, they're still not really doing it. They're keeping the game moving, but not keeping the context of what's happening in the game within their decision.
And I don't know if Aledmus had already used his timeout. If he hadn't, then you would think at least the umpire would have just granted it, considering you could see him over there trying to pull his thumb back into place.
Right.
The Cubs ran into another thing on Friday night in Cody Bellinger's return to Dodger Stadium. Fans gave him a standing ovation, and he got a pitch clock violation because he wasn't in the box. He decided not to be rude and ignore his former fans.
Right.
And so he started his first at-bat in Dodger Stadium as a Cub with a strike. It's like, okay, I would think that in certain circumstances, the umpire could simply give a quick signal to whoever to just reset the clock. Just start it over. You don't do that once a week, once a game. Who the hell's ever going to notice?
Right. I think we have already made up like an entire season's worth of standing around and doing nothing in games, over the full 6-month schedule. We've already made up that time.
Yeah.
We're way ahead now. The games, somebody played a doubleheader in about 4 hours the other day. Maybe it was the White Sox and Phillies. I'm not sure.
It was, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. And we're doing great on the time. We can take a break for someone who has buzzy bees in his thumbs or whatever, or an ovation. It's like I think it's the umpires doing a power trip. I'm not sure. I don't know. I don't know what it is. If they're afraid to not go by the book, and they're in the past. Like I said, they haven't really been good at moving the game along because here we are, but they certainly will stick their nose into things and become the story on other occasions. And to me, I think that's maybe what's going on here. I think they're bucking for. I mean, I just I think they're trying to get more money, or there's something.
Well, you can't tell me they're worried about getting in trouble for getting calls wrong, considering Laz Diaz and Angel Hernandez and people like that still exist. So,
sure.
Yeah, it's got to just be, you're going to make us do this. This is how we're going to do it. Love it or lump it. Because the overall effect of the pitch clock, I think, has been great. It's so nice to figure you can just budget 2.5 hours of your time and see an entire baseball game. I mean, there are things I miss. I wish Felix PA were still around and we could watch him grab his balls with both hands somehow before every pitch. That was always fun. But he wouldn't have time to do that anymore. Poor guy. I kind of wish this had come in when Nomar was still playing.
Oh boy.
So we could watch him literally pass out from not being able to fuck with the Velcro on his gloves for 30 seconds between every pitch for no reason.
Could he have gotten a medical exemption for that?
I would think, yeah. I mean, that'll be the next thing. I mean, we know half the league at least is on Ritalin. At some point, one of them's going to show up with a doctor's note and just hand it to the umpire and be like, "You can't rush me, bro." It's kind of like Engelberg and Bad News Bears when he's like, "Just don't stop making or stop telling me about my weight. My doctor says it doesn't do any good." That's the same thing.
Right.
So just knock
That's why I'm fat in the first place.
The umpires were also Max Scherzer got tossed today for having sticky fingers. He swears up and down it was simply rosin and sweat.
I swear on my kids,
Yep,
my kids' eyes.
Kids.
It was like he was turned it into a mafioso or something.
Did he swear on the kids' blue eyes or green eyes?
Both of them.
Yeah.
So whatever color that makes when you combine them. I suspect I just said so on Twitter that Phil Cuzzy doesn't really know what he's doing when it comes to checking. That Phil does not know the difference between rosin and sweat and whatever he thinks Scherzer might have.
Didn't Phil say they were the stickiest hands he'd ever checked?
I don't want to know, but he's been the guy all 3 times, I guess, for these recent sticky violations. So it's like Phil's, got a playbook that other people don't have. I don't know. I just, based on his history getting other things wrong, which is well documented, I don't believe him. I think he's making it up. Really,
Doesn't it seem like there should be something more sophisticated, like a black light or something they get to wave over their hands?
Oh, can you imagine?
Like a concert, my brother used to have these like furry concert posters with like neon stuff on them, and he had a black light for his bedroom.
Right.
You could turn that on, everything would glow. And then
you
didn't want to look at it. You didn't want to look at his comforter either.
They tell you to bring one when you go traveling to a hotel, and you'll be absolutely appalled at what you'll find on the bed
and where you'll find things, like on the ceiling.
Right. So apply one of those to Max Scherzer or someone else, and maybe that is what we need to have happen to get the pitchers in line if they are breaking the rules. In fact, and maybe they are. I just don't think Phil Cuzzy is the guy to. I don't think he's very Columbo-like at all. So.
And I feel bad about anything that takes attention away from what we know is the most important thing that's happened this season in Major League Baseball.
Yeah.
And that is the Cubs getting new light bulbs.
Right.
Marquis somehow got 2 nights and 1 day out of full game conversation about the fact that the Cubs now have LED light bulbs instead of the old-fashioned Sylvanias that they had screwed in there.
Right, the incandescent, fantastic.
To the point where Boog actually said on the broadcast, these lights are so bright, I would think that some people may have tuned in just now and they don't know if this is a night or a day game. Well, it's 9 o'clock at night in Chicago.
Right.
I mean, Cub fans are dumb. We're dumb, but we're not that dumb. We can tell daytime from nighttime.
Maybe the ones confused people in Honolulu or
Right, or
Guam,
Australia.
perhaps.
Yeah. Like, well, what time is it in there in the colonies? I wouldn't call them the colonies.
You're right.
would they? Yeah. Anyway,
Does it look brighter to you? Because I know
it is noticeable. Because
Yeah.
Wrigley, once new Yankee Stadium was built, Wrigley was the only park left without lights in the outfield.
right.
Although I think it may have been Pat Hughes who was saying, well, but the scoreboards give off a lot of light. Like, okay, we can't count on that, Pat.
No, especially because
You could field that ball by the light of Nico Horner's on-base average. You'll be
Right.
fine. You can catch it right over there in the corner.
Well, you never know what you're going to put on those scoreboards, so and it's changing. Sometimes it's a TV picture, and
Sometimes
it's not always the same.
black.
Those lights up on the towers, those are constant.
Right. But since 1988, Cub games have always night games have looked different from the center field camera because there's always a shadow on the back of the pitcher because there's no light directly hitting the pitcher. You could read his number, but it was always, and that's gone. Like there are no more shadows.
Is that just to be nice to the neighborhood? Is that why they didn't put more in, or was it like a deal with Tunney or whoever the alderman was in 1988? Maybe it was, but
Oh yeah, I should pull the tape. You go watch the whole interview with Crane Kenny, where they talk about all this exciting stuff. No, there's fewer lights now. They're just that much brighter.
Oh, I see.
They pulled like 200 lights out, actual individual
Bulbs.
fixtures, and they have more. The new lights are so great. Crane got them at a garage sale. They need a lot fewer. So here's another thing that they're doing now, which is when the Cubs won that first game, the first night game with the new lights, and when they won, they queued up "Go Cubs Go," and the lights started to flash, and the lights make little W's.
Oh, right. Yes.
And Obvious Shirts just happened to have a Light the W t-shirt ready to go for people to buy.
Just happened to.
Just happened to have it. It was amazing. But it was funny because in Dodger Stadium, they have this elaborate light thing they do every time the Dodgers hit a homer. And I don't know if you saw Max Muncy hit one the other night. And the light operator got a little excited. And the ball had not, it was, thankfully for the, it was a long home run. But the ball had not yet gone over the fence, and the lights in the outfield went off. And the outfielders are like, "Whoa, hey, turn the light! Where did the ball go?" It's like it is in the seats. But that'll be great someday when they screw that up and turn the lights off, and the ball hits the wall, or two outfielders kill each other because they running at each other in the dark.
Do you remember in Men in Black when the flying saucer appeared over Shea Stadium, and then the ball hit Bernard Gilkey in the face? One of those kind of things will happen.
I thought that didn't really happen. I thought that really happened.
it might have been based on a true story.
They used actual footage. They didn't need. Yes. We don't even need to look at that. We can put this in the movie. Yeah, let's put that in. But yeah, so and the Cubs with all that light in their ballpark are. How about this? Not only are the Cubs 11-6, their run differential of plus 39 is the best in the National League.
That's pretty good. They are playing as well as the team that Jed put together could play. You know what I mean? It's right. I think what's happening should be happening. It's I wasn't sure if it would because sometimes Dansby turns into Jeff Blauser, in other years, but it's not happening this year.
Well, Dansby put a scare in everybody. He had 4 hits in the first 5 innings of a game, and then he was all of a sudden not in the game anymore. And they showed him wincing and holding his side. Turns out he got he had cramps from getting up too early in the morning.
Right.
He had gotten up at 4 o'clock in the morning to take his wife, soccer star Mallory Pugh Swanson,
Right.
to get her patella fixed. And it was a long day, and apparently Dansby not properly hydrated, and
Right.
it ended up really being a cramp, and he was not hurt, but we all just assumed he had ripped the oblique off of his body.
Right.
They see him after the All-Star break.
It's fair to assume the worst.
Now,
he got some criticism. I'm never going to do that. I'm not going to criticize a husband and wife team, especially.
Yeah, it's stupid.
Yeah. She's a professional athlete, and
even if she's not,
right?
If your wife has, he didn't miss the game. He was there, and he got 4 hits in 5 innings, and the Cubs were way up. He should have just pretended nothing hurt, and then I just needed a nap. We had this one in the bag. Well, people will criticize other people for anything. We know that, so just do whatever. You're going to get criticized for it regardless. One thing I'm sure is completely sustainable for the Cubs is that they lead the league in batting average with runners in scoring position at 326.
Yeah, maybe it won't keep up all year.
But there are some other impressive things. Now, there are 3 teams in Major League Baseball who currently have more than 20 homers and more than 20 stolen bases. One of them is the Cubs with 21 homers and 22 stolen bases. Can you name the other 2? There is one in each league, and they both play in the Eastern time zone.
Is one the Pirates?
Yes. 25 homers and 21 stolen bases.
Right. That was the harder one. I don't remember the other one.
The Orioles. 23 homers and 25 stolen bases.
I think I did see that.
Now, how about this? Do you think there's a team that does not hit double digits in either category?
It's probably the White Sox.
It's the Nationals.
Oh.
8 homers, 9 stolen bases.
They're in no hurry.
No. Nico Horner and the Nationals have 9 stolen bases. Patrick Wisdom and the Nationals have 8 home runs.
Right.
Yeesh. There's only one team in the National League West that is playing above 500 right now.
Yeah, the Diamondbacks.
The Diamondbacks.
I didn't predict that, but before the season, I think it was before the season, I did like what they had going. I like the cut of their jib, and they have one of those guys, rookie Corbin Carroll, who's hitting some home runs and stealing some bases, and I really like Torey Lovullo. He's he's one of Sparky Anderson's hype guys from the 80s or 90s. This guy's going to be the next Barbaro Garbey or whatever. But he's taken that positivity and turned it into something useful for himself. So I like, a good manager is usually only as good as his players, but I think he's got some good players, and I like what they have going. I don't know if they're first place material, but they're certainly better.
Well, on this very podcast, the last time we did it, you and I have a very strong recommendation to take the over with the Diamondbacks. I think it was only like 83 wins.
Was it that many? I thought it was
maybe
like
it was even
78.
Well, yeah, it was throw your money at it. It's too late now. Their odds, I'm sure, you missed your chance.
Adjusted. Yes.
Speaking of, Torey's got some good players, and he's got Madison Bumgarner, who was throwing batting practice to the Cardinals today and got in a mid-at-bat screaming match with former Cub Willson Contreras, which was a lot of fun.
And then Bumgarner, people were like, "Well, what did he do?" And his answer was like, "Wasn't it obvious?" We're like, "No." I mean, it was.
He was being Venezuelan, Madison.
I mean, yeah, there could be something to that.
Yeah,
people have actually studied who Madison Bumgarner has gotten mad at through the years, and it does run the gamut of, let's say, ethnicities. But that's sort of the first thing people go to.
I thought the worst thing for poor Wilson was that the Cardinal fans all immediately sided with Madison.
Ugh.
Yeah, you would be shocked to know that just a couple of days ago, before he hit 2 homers the other night in a loss, actually just last night, Cardinal fans already off the Willson Contreras bandwagon. How are we going to offload this contract? And when's Yachty coming back? Our pitching. It was a lot of, their pitching has struggled because they don't have a lot of really good pitchers, and a lot of what's the difference between this year and last year? What's missing? Well, I don't know. You don't have Yachty on your injured list? That's pretty much the only difference between this year and last year. Or he's not off at the Puerto Rican basketball league playoffs.
I was going to say the only out for Willson is going to be if he likes basketball enough to buy a team somewhere. That's the only way they're going to get rid of him.
I was looking at my list of surprises here. I have the Pirates on it at 11-5.
I didn't see it coming. I mean, it's a surprise to me. Rodolfo Castillo is tearing the cover off the ball, and I think he was the guy who lost his cell phone going around the bases. I want to say it was last year.
Yeah,
maybe
that was against the Cubs. Yeah,
that's right. That's right.
I don't blame a guy for the 2021 Cubs were phoning it in. Why couldn't
he? Oh man. And you don't need your phone during games anymore. They go by too quick. There's no time.
You don't have time. Nope. They of course got a tough break, no pun intended or pun intended, when O'Neal Cruz slid into home plate and his ankle went in different directions.
Yeah, those are icky injuries. You got to make up your mind to slide or don't. Run over the catcher or don't. I mean, chances are if you run over the catcher these days, you're going to be in the wrong. But yeah, he got caught in between, and that was not pretty.
I mentioned that the Cubs lead the National League with a plus 39 run differential. Part of that is helped by the fact that they just finished up 3 games against the. I don't even know. What would the A's record be if they were in AAA? Probably not a lot better.
That's a great, horrible question. It's. I mean, I'm guessing about 500. They probably have a lot of guys in AAA who could come up, and maybe they already have. I don't know.
Now, Bob Nightingale did the math, and who's going to argue with Bob Nightingale's math?
Mm-hmm.
Oakland is on pace, if they can keep it up, to go 26-136.
That's probably not going to hold up like the Cubs hitting in with runners in scoring position, but I could see, like a 51, like the Orioles from a couple years ago, kind of a thing, a 50 and 112.
They're plus minus. They have a minus 86 run differential. The Rays,
already?
Yes,
that's incredible.
The Rays, who won the first 13 in a row and beat the shit out of everybody, theirs is plus 83.
Right.
Oakland has been worse than the Rays were good. But here's a little for all the A's fans who listen to this podcast. Here's a little silver lining to the start of the season. They have yet to play a team who is currently under 500.
Well, they're never going to play themselves.
No. Well, I don't know. I don't know how the balance schedule works. Are there any inter-squad games? At least they could get it. They could be guaranteed a tie.
It's possible you were going to bring this up, but the most interesting thing about the A's so far is that there's a varmint living in the visiting. I don't know if it's radio or TV.
TV.
And apparently they is it because it's California they can't kill it? I don't know. But he's living there, and like teams won't go in there because this big old possum, and it's from what I can tell, it looks like it's like 2 feet long. Is living in the Oakland Coliseum. I mean, it's not a surprise considering how much that place is flooded and how icky it is that there isn't somebody living in there. But they apparently Gavin Newsom won't let them kill it.
It could be. Shouldn't they just trap it and make it their mascot? I mean, they had a white elephant. Possum would be cooler. If they had any fans, there would be possum T-shirts and the rally possum and all that stuff, and none of that is happening.
Well, hey, they have some people in the bleachers who are pretty crazy.
Well, that's true. So maybe it is, and there's just not enough of them. Nobody has noticed yet that they have possum fever.
I mean, they've driven them mostly away at this point, but
yes, I would not blame.
I'm just saying somebody's going to make a rally possum shirt or character or something.
Yeah, so the Cubs, Rick Sutcliffe and Boog Shambi were doing the games this week from an auxiliary. They got plenty of them. There was plenty of empty boxes at Oakland Coliseum, so that wasn't an issue.
Right. Thanks to Mount Davis.
And the Mets had been in just before that, and Gary Cohen and Ron Darling had a long explanation about the possum, how Wayne Randazzo and Mark Gubicza were in the booth. And this is probably why the Angels radio guys are like, I'm glad we don't travel. They were in the booth for the first series in Oakland, and they had a little run-in with the possum. But mostly, what they said, they got a run-in to possum leavings. The odor in the box was very apparent, and so the good people in Oakland moved them, and they have been putting all of the TV teams in the other box.
Yeah, I had heard some of Boog's play-by-play from the Cubs series, and I hadn't put two and two together that he was doing the game from the hotel or whatever because the booth was busy. But it sounded like, why does he sound, like he's doing a COVID remote? But yeah, it was because of that.
Well, Gary Cohen showed the box they were in, and there was. The reason they don't normally have the broadcast teams use it is that there's a pole in it, and he was right behind the pole. But he's talking about this. I've done college basketball, and the coach is almost always standing right in front of you. So you do a lot of leaning. He's like, I'm used to it. Don't worry about it. I can handle this. I'm mobile.
I'd like to meet him and interview him, or at least meet him. He seems like a cool guy. That actually sounds. I mean, he's obviously making lemonade with the lemons, but that's a real thing. I believe him when he says, "Well, there's a coach in the way I can broadcast from a pole." I like that.
The White Sox, they're not good.
No, I'm trying to think of something that's gone right. Jake Berger is kind of a fun guy, sort of shaped like a fan or a sports writer, hitting some home runs. He had a 3-patty day the other day. Rerun homer. Other than that, I can't think of anything good.
He hit one of the hardest home runs in the StatCast. I love everything that was in the StatCast era.
Yeah.
Jared Kelenic hit homers in 3 straight games for the Mariners against the Cubs, and he hit one up into the second tier of bleachers, over the batter's eye.
Yes.
And Boog could not believe that anyone had ever hit the ball that far. It's like, okay, Boog. The Cubs had a guy named Sammy Sosa for about a decade who was roided to the gills, and he hit plenty of balls there. And we even pulled the clip from the 2003 NLCS when he hit the shed that they keep the center field camera in. But Kelenic was like the longest home run to center in Wrigley in the StatCast era, which is 2015 to
the Cubs are always looking for reasons to ignore that Sammy Sosa existed. So there's another one.
Right. We can't put him in the Utility Tunnel Hall of Fame. He didn't play in the StatCast era.
Right. Yeah.
Or he didn't hit any home runs in the StatCast era. None. Okay. How many did Ernie Banks hit? But yeah, so how about this? If the playoffs started today, it would be pure chaos because it's April and no one would know what they were on.
Rob is going to try it. Warning you.
In the American League, the 2 teams with the byes would be the Rays and the Texas Rangers.
Yeah.
How about that? Despite losing 2 of 3 to the mighty Cubs, they still would have the second best record in the American League. And how about this for your wild card matchups? Toronto would be at Baltimore, and Shohei Ohtani and Mike Trout would be.
Oh, they're in.
at Minnesota by percentage
Not the
points.
season.
They would be the fourth wild card team, and they would be going to Minnesota to play 2 games and then go home for the rest of it.
Yeah, as long as the Twins don't have to play the Yankees in the postseason, they're going to be fine.
Yep.
That seems to be kryptonite for them.
They won the opener of a series against the Yankees this year, and there were people talking about how they've exercised the demons of Yankee Stadium.
Yes.
I don't think winning 1 regular season game counts. I'm sorry, guys. It's progress, but I don't think it's exercised it. In the National League, your teams with the byes would be the Atlanta Braves and the Milwaukee Brewers. And your wild card matchups.
Where are Bob Uecker's loyalties?
Yeah. He would just do he could just switch booths every half inning.
Right, as long as there isn't a possum.
They would just feed the possum curds until he exploded in Milwaukee.
Right.
Or he looked like Rowdy Tellez, one or the other. Your wild card matchups, if the playoffs start today in the National League, the Miami Marlins would be in Arizona to play the NL West champions, the D-backs.
Right.
And a rematch of one of my favorite wild card game of all time would be the Pittsburgh Pirates and the Chicago Cubs.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm sure that's all going to hold up. Boy, that's quite a National League playoff field. Atlanta, Milwaukee, Arizona, Miami, Chicago, and Pittsburgh.
Hey, the Cubs are a big market. So.
Yeah, that would be the one saving grace for Fox, would be the Cubs. Of course, there's no Yankees in the American League right now either. So Tampa, Dallas, Minneapolis, St. Paul, LA, but nobody pays attention to the Angels. Baltimore and Canada.
It's a country.
John Greenberg agrees with me on this. We love TV sports ratings talk.
Right.
A guy like Richard Deitch or John Orand or somebody will make a huge deal out of it. Like they'll breathlessly talk about the Super Bowl ratings. And then it's a race to Twitter to see if John or I can get to it first and be like, oh, so they're still going to have a Super Bowl next year? The ratings were high enough? They're not going to cancel it?
You guys.
Deitch is, he lives in Toronto now, but he still basically claims that when there's a Canadian team in the playoffs in any of the North American sports, like networks don't know how to calculate the ratings. So it's basically a zero, no matter who they play. Like, I think at least half the fans, right, were Americans watching it, and
with the exchange rate, it's got to be 85% anyway.
Also, don't 80% of Canadians live within like 40 miles of the U.S. border?
Right. That's
so
why
they
they're
all
so
watch American TV. They watch American ads. They buy American products. I think we maybe could figure that out and
they
stop
like the
freaking
Bill.
people out.
They go to Mariners games. I hear about it all the time.
So speaking of TV, Sunday is the return of one of my favorite cash grabs. The what do they call it? Sunday leadoff, which is that early morning Sunday game on Peacock. Which mostly, I don't think anyone has ever watched one of those games when it starts.
Right.
It's always somebody looks down on Twitter and is like, "Wait a minute, they're playing now on what?"
Right.
And nobody gets there to like the 5th inning, and then they're like, "Oh, here it is, I found it," and it's buffering. But
it's like that Patriots Day game with the Red Sox. It's like, oh, I knew it was on at 9 a.m.
Well, and I actually remembered it was on, put it on, rain delay.
Yeah.
So. And then I forgot about it. So last year, the lead announcer for this was the great Jason Benetti, and Benetti is now off to Fox, and he's not doing this anymore. Although he was at ESPN before, he must have had some kind of agreement. So they have replaced him with a hockey announcer, Brendan Burke.
Oh.
But he can't do all the. He can't do some of the early games because he is. What is he? He's the Maple Leafs announcer, I think. and they're in the playoffs until they get bounced, in a few days. So, a voice familiar to Chicago, at least hockey fans, Chris Foster's is going to fill in. He's going to do a couple of games, and Matt Vasgersian is actually going to do the season opener this Sunday, which is a barn burner. You're going to want to set your alarm to get up for Rockies at Phillies.
Oh, man.
But it's not that early.
That was late in like 2008.
It's an 11:05 p.m. start Central Time.
11:05 a.m.?
A.m.
Yeah.
In a couple of weeks, then they get into their 10:30 starts. Cub fans will note that the game a week from Sunday, April 30th, the Cubs at Marlins, is an 11 o'clock start. So, so there you go. I don't know why that always excites me, but I've said before, games can't start early enough. I'm old. I like to get up. I like to get an entire baseball game in during breakfast, and then I have the rest of my day to do whatever I want.
Hey, if people can do it for Formula One and the Premier League,
and I do both of those things.
Yes.
I think part of my dislike for Sunday night baseball is not just the announcers over the years. Actually, it's not even really the announcers. It's the way ESPN tries to, make it an event.
Yeah.
It's like, guys, this is like the 15th game I've watched this week. Just do it like a normal baseball game. But is when I was writing for The Athletic, my column was Monday mornings, and when the Cubs were on, that meant I couldn't finish writing the thing in case something exciting happened during the Sunday night game that had to be in there. So it always pissed me off. So even now, when I'm, and I assigned myself a Monday morning column when I could have done it any day I wanted. I always write a Monday column for the newsletter. Same thing. It's like, I just get the damn game over with. But now it starts an hour earlier. It's at 6 now, and it's 6:10, I think, instead of 7. And the games only take like 45 minutes because the umps are enforcing the speed up rule so much. I have nothing to worry about.
Right.
But one of the things that it happens in different forms, in different broadcasts. The regional sports networks, most of them, do these awkward manager interviews during games, which are worthless, basically. I don't know why they do them. You don't get any insight, and they're always uncomfortable because inevitably something happens, and the manager is like, I'd like to go do my real job now instead of talking to you. Except for David Ross. David Ross always seems to have plenty of time for Boog and JD. Hey, what happened down there, Rusty? What? I don't know. I was talking to you. I wasn't paying attention. But on Sunday Night Baseball, they mic up the players. And Andrew Marchand from the New York Post, I don't know if he broke the news or just finally reported it, they're paying those players $10,000 to chat with Carl Ravitch, David Cohn, and Eduardo Perez during games.
It's funny that but that's enough. You think maybe it would cost more?
I don't like them. I don't care that they're getting paid. I'm with you. I would think that for the inconvenience of having to do that while you were trying to do your job, you would want more money. But I just, as a fan, I very seldom think they're ever worth anything. And they always act like if it's always when the guy's in the field, and they always act like it's just the craziest thing ever if he has to go field a ball while he's got the microphone on.
Right.
It's like, isn't that what we're going for here?
Right. They're turned on by the hyperventilation of chasing the ball into the corner.
Now, I'm not against miking players. I like when they mic a player and then they do a cut-up after the game of him talking to the other players and say whatever. Yeah. I enjoy those. The interviews are always stilted. And the thing that really annoys me about the ESPN ones is, I've been doing it now for, I think this is the third year, or maybe it's just the second year for Carl. Ravitch always asks like 400-word, 6-part questions.
Right.
To a guy standing in the middle of the field who could barely hear him, because, there's crowd noise and other stuff, and can't follow what the hell his question was.
Right.
It's like, you got to be a little quicker than that, Carl. And if you can't
as I have said before about doing interviews, because sometimes I ask questions of players, and sometimes, I realize after the fact that was way too long of a question. I put myself in the player's position, and it's like, sometimes I don't know how they do it. I don't know how they answer simple questions or contrived questions or anything. I hate being put on the spot myself. It's it's not like I'm not talking to you so much. I just mean, like, if my kids ask me something about the game or an interview, it's hard for me to remember, like, facts and things. Yeah. I don't know how these guys do it. I don't. And even good questions, I can't understand how the brain works and how they're able to answer things on the spot, in a clubhouse setting sometimes, much less out in the field, like you said, when they're trying to do their jobs. It's painful. Once in a while you strike gold, but I agree with you that those edited sound bites are much better after the fact, and maybe they should just go with that.
Yeah,
for free.
Those can be fun. And then if you get a dud, like early in the year, the Cubs, or in spring training, the Cubs mic'd up Patrick Wisdom. He had nothing to say.
Right.
They somehow tried to turn it into a 2-minute segment of mostly dead air and him clapping. And it's like, okay, you guys, were you afraid to hurt Patrick's feelings and say, sorry, we didn't get anything usable? Because you didn't.
Right.
It's marquee. They have time to kill. They'll air anything. They don't care. They've got a commercial that they run during their interminable pre and post game, and I refuse to watch the pre and post game on marquee, at least with the sound up. Sometimes I'll have it on the second TV down here, so I can keep an eye, especially the pregame, so that when the game actually starts, I can flip it over to the bigger TV.
Yeah.
But you'll see these commercials, and they have this one. I don't know what it's for. It's like I think it's for like old person life insurance. Without a physical, you can get $1 million worth of life insurance. It'll only cost you $40,000 a month.
Right.
But it's basically infomercial length. The thing is like 5 minutes long, and you'll look up, and I'll be like, "Am I on the right channel still? Is this a show? I thought it was the pregame show." So they'll air anything. They don't care. But you are an actual good interviewer. We know that from the Answer Dave column that you used to write. And one of the things that the good interviewers don't do is they don't answer the question. Try to sound like a smart guy and answer the question for the player as they ask it.
Yeah,
you hear that a lot. Or where they'll ask what they think is a tough question, but they'll kind of lead them to a safe answer.
Right.
One of the things I've done is had to coach people who don't typically do interviews, give them some tips. And I for the longest time I used Chris Bryant as an example of what not to do.
Mm-hmm.
Chris Bryant starts the answer to almost every question with yes. It's just like a nervous thing he does.
Right.
And sometimes he'll get asked some like controversial. He got asked questions about the whole Addison Russell thing, and he's starting them all with yes because he doesn't even know he's saying it. He's like, so do you think Addison's getting the shaft? Yes. I mean, what he did is terrible, and he should get punished. Why did you say yes? I did. It's like that's a relatively intelligent person, but with
Nazis aren't so bad, right, Chris? Yeah.
Yeah, they're awful. Wait a minute, what did I say? So we talked a little bit already about the pitch clock, but I want to talk about. I turned it into part of actually, it was going to be the entire column on Tuesday. Theo Epstein had been on the Starkville podcast with Jason Stark and Doug Lanville, and he was talking about all the rules changes and how they're going and what might be coming down the pike and all that stuff. But it only ended up being half the column because while I was writing it, I was watching the Cubs, and Rick Sutliffe was on all fours, just taking whatever the Cubs would give him. He could not have been more excited about the Cubs and the greatest team ever. And he's making these. He legitimately did this, which just cracked me up. He must have asked for a replay. Hit the old cough button and say, "Can we get a shot of that?" Patrick Wisdom was on first base, and I believe it was Cody Bellinger hit a fly ball to center field that you couldn't tell if the ace center fielder was going to be able to catch it or not. And Rick was so impressed because brace yourself right now, and you at home listening, grab onto something. This is what Patrick Wisdom did. He ran halfway, and he stopped, so that he was close enough to second if the ball fell in that he could get to second, and if it got caught, he could get back to first base.
Yeah.
And Rick thought that was like the greatest base running thing he'd ever seen in his life. It's like, Rick, they teach little leaguers to do that.
Right.
Just calm down. He also did this, and I think people think I was exaggerating. They were talking up Nick Madrigal. He's a huge Nick Madrigal fan, as so am I. And Nick was playing third base for some reason, and there was a ball hit a good 5 feet foul, and Nick ran over, not particularly hard. Nick ran over and backhanded it to give it to the ump, and Rick couldn't believe the range. And you're just like, come on, buddy. So I looked it up. He played 18 years in the major leagues. He won a Cy Young. He almost won 2. He pitched in 2 NLCSs for the Cubs. He was one of the best pitchers in the 1980s.
Yeah.
And now he's doing it, and you would think he never saw a baseball game before. Like, everything is just he's just enraptured with everything. But the funny thing is that people they're like, you lay off of him. The Cubs have a good team and he's enjoying it. And it's like, okay, he was doing this stuff last year too, when they didn't have a good team, and he was bragging about, and he did it a little bit today. Somehow Alfonso Rivas, his name came up, and he's like, oh, that guy, boy, he had a great eye. He could really get on base. Like, well, he had a 311 on base average last year, Rick. I don't think that counts, but he was doing the same thing on one of the West Coast trips he was filling in, and he was telling how great it was, but the Cubs made the mistake of putting Ildemaro Vargas into the game, and Ildemaro made a couple of bad plays right in a row, and Rick turned on poor Ildemaro.
Oh, man.
And as Pollyanna-ish as he'd been about every other Cub, he had just had it with Ildemaro, and Ildemaro got a case of Rick Sutliffe red ass for the next 2 hours, which was very entertaining. I really did enjoy that. I'm like, see, you got it in you. Just break it out once in a while. But anyway, so I was going to write up the thing about Theo, and I did. I wrote some of the stuff. But one of the things that he talked about in that podcast that I found strange, I want to ask you about it, is it kind of, I think, was sparked by that at-bat you talked about, the World Baseball Classic at-bat between Shohei and Trout, and people worrying about, what if we get to a huge moment in the World Series and it gets rushed because of this pitch clock stuff?
Right.
So he got asked by Jason Stark, is there any talk about not having the pitch clock in the postseason? And Theo didn't say no, but he also didn't say yes. He basically said, we'll keep an eye on everything. But to me, that would just be perfect baseball, right? The MLB at its finest, which is, here's this thing that fans universally applaud. And now you get to the postseason when you're going to get even more people watching, and you just get rid of it.
Right.
Yeah. Hey, we're going to slow everything down for you again. Do you like that? No.
Well, I don't know where you'll fall on this, but I saw something the other day where in a minor league they're talking about taking away a team's DH, experimenting with a rule, and the team loses a DH if the pitcher doesn't go 5 innings. Yep. Something we remember the stipulation when they were talking about changing the major league rule as that being a possible thing, and so it's like, we, for those of us who didn't necessarily like to see the pitchers hit, they finally get rid of it, and now they're talking about putting it back where you would lose the so sort of in line with what you're saying about changing something that I think is good about baseball, that they got rid of it, even though I would have been fine, I guess, with having with no DH in the National League, just because it's different and that's what I grew up with. I would have been okay with it, but it sort of made sense to get rid of it based on how the pitchers were hitting. And now they're talking about, well, maybe we don't need to have a DH anymore for an entire game. It's just, cutting off their nose to spite their face again.
Well, that whole idea, I got kicked around a few years ago, and originally it was going to be your DH could only stay in the game as long as your starting pitcher, regardless of. So like even if your starter went 7, now you get down to the crucial part of the game and your DH is gone, and they say, okay, that's guys don't go 9 anymore. That's just not very realistic. So that's where they came up with they want to test it with the 5 inning thing,
Right.
And that I think is a reaction to try to get rid of the opener. Basically, tell teams, yeah, if you want to start a reliever, that's fine, but your bench better be ready to go because every time the pitcher spot rolls around, you're either going to have a reliever bat or you're going to have to use a pinch hitter.
Right.
But then it's the Atlantic League, and they're also talking about the good old courtesy runner, like they used to have for chubby catchers back in Little League. And this would be you could use it one time in the game. You could pinch run for any player, and as long as you determine that you tell the ump this is the pinch runner or the courtesy runner, or they're going to call it the Manfred runner, which makes no sense. Then at the conclusion of his trip around the bases, he goes back to the bench and he's able to be used again as a pinch hitter or a defensive replacement.
Right.
And the player that he ran for is still in the game. It's literally a courtesy runner. It's not. And obviously it makes. I think the part of it I wasn't clear on until I read was if you actually burn the runner. Of course you don't burn the player. Nobody would do it. That's just a pinch runner. But both guys are still available to be used after that. So that would be interesting. Be like that old. Who was the old Oakland A? He was the 70s version, 60s and 70s version of Terrence Gore.
Yes. Yes.
And I
never had an at bat, I don't think.
Cub fans remember that Terrence got one in the playoffs.
Yeah.
He got a full count, and everybody yelled, "Just don't swing, don't swing!"
Right.
And he swung and he struck out.
Right.
The funny thing about Terrence Gore was because Joe put him in way too early. It was the wild card game against the Rockies. Nobody could score, especially the Cubs. Rizzo got on, I think, in the 7th, maybe even I think it was the 7th, and he ran Gore for him, and then he left Gore in the game, and Terrence went out to play left field, and Terrence didn't like that at all. He basically stood on the warning track and just prayed that the ball didn't get hit to him. He did have to catch a ball, and he did catch it, but the ESPN kept showing him. They were obsessed with how scared he was to be in left field. It's like, oh God, are you? You're not a baseball player. You're not. You don't get at bats, and you don't play in the field. You're literally just a track guy with a baseball uniform on. But yeah, I think I'm fine with them considering rule changes, but you did a good job this year. Let's not push it. Let's not just change them to keep. Ooh, that was great. Let's do some more. It's not even a rule change. It's an equipment change that I agree with. And Jim DeShays brings it up every time there's a close play at first base.
Yeah.
And that's Major League Baseball should have the safety base. If for no other reason, then runners wouldn't have to run out of the baseline to get to first base.
It's so weird that they have to. They should have just put it in a long time ago.
And I almost wonder if the reason they don't do it is for aesthetics. Because in order for it to work, the part of the base that's in foul territory has to be a different color.
You have to do orange.
So that if the ball hits it, the ump can tell. Because if the ball hits that part of the base, it's foul. And if the ball hits, so I think that's part of it. It's like, we're not gonna be able to do that. It's like, well, I don't know. The other one that I've talked about it forever. The replay thing that is kind of universally hated is the whole reviewing whether a guy's foot left the bag by a quarter of an inch while the second baseman or shortstop still had the tag on. And I have what I think is a pretty simple solution for that, which is that play is not reviewable.
Right.
The umpire, if he called him out, he's out. If he called him safe, he's safe. And you can't review it.
They do it. I mean, there's lots of stuff that isn't reviewable. Yep. That should be one of them.
Another thing that Sutliffe loved. I'd never seen this before. But I had the same when I first saw what was happening, I drew the same conclusion that Rick Sutliffe did. So
Yeah.
Trey Mancini III is struggling mightily. And in last night's, or I say last night, people listen to the podcast. So in Tuesday night's game against Oakland, where the Cubs were, or maybe it was Monday night. Anyway, they were drubbing the A's. One of the nights they were drubbing the A's. Trey was going over while all of his friends were running around the bases and having fun. And he had a foul ball down the third base line that was fouled by about a foot. And David Ross challenged it. And I remember thinking, he's just challenging it to he's throwing Trey a bone.
Right.
And Rick was like, this is brilliant. Oh my God, this is brilliant. Even if it doesn't get overturned. I'm like, well, it's not, because even live we could see there was like a foot of grass between the ball and the line. He's like, this is a message he's sending to Trey, which is, I got your back. And I'm thinking, I think the message he's sending is, we don't think you can get a hit for real. So maybe we could steal one for you. How's that?
It all depends on how Trey is feeling about himself in the moment.
Yeah. You know how it started with the great Luis Valbuena, but there's lots of players now who will, batters who will do a check swing and they will appeal themselves.
Right.
I think it would be funny if Trey hit it and gave the move on sign to the dugout. No, don't review that. No, don't review it. It's foul. I don't want to know.
Is that the move on sign? It's very much like a home run.
Yeah, I think it is. And then I love that the earmuffs is the review.
Yeah, go to review, yes. I think that's a headset, not earmuffs, but yes, funny.
No, it's like from old school when they're going to swear in front of the kid. All right, earmuffs. Actually, that would have been great. Mark Kotze should have come out today before he was going to argue, and he should have given the earmuff sign to the fans. I'm about to say something naughty. Earmuffs.
Yeah,
that's
and for the
bullshit.
The truck, so they could put them on delay.
Yeah, right. So there's that, which is fun. Yeah, I think that's about it. I didn't get an argument because I'm a big man. I let it go. I had made the case often in the offseason that I liked the fact that the Cubs signed Cody Bellinger. I thought it was ridiculous that they gave him a 1-year contract. And we've talked about it on this podcast, about how basically if you're confident you can get something out of this guy, what you're giving him is you're giving him something of value, which is, we're going to turn your career back around. You got to sign was for 2 years. We're going to turn you around, and we're going to get another year out of it, and then you can go cash in. You can do whatever you want. And, of course, him and his agent, super agent, Scott Boras, were like, we just want 1 year. We were going to cash in next year. And the Cubs were like, okay. It's really early, but he looks like the old Cody Bellinger, at least for now. Who knows? He may be an overly aggressive high five over the weekend, and he's back to nothing.
Let's watch that.
But there were fans who were like, we wouldn't have signed otherwise. It's like, well, then they shouldn't have signed him.
Yeah.
You're looking for, this is a Cub team, it's a lot more fun to watch because they're actually kind of good. But it's a weird mix of 1-year rentals on top of, and actually none of the prospects are really, it's like a limbo year.
Right.
Where there's very few guys who are on this team that are really part of the long-term future. There's more now with the Grady and Happ contract extension and stuff. But there's just a small core of guys. There's a bunch of guys who are just going to be gone. And Cody's one of those guys, unfortunately, because I don't think there's any chance that if he has a good year, the Cubs are going to want to pony up. And they're going, oh, no, we got Pete Crow Armstrong. We already got the other guys. But I want him to do well. He's on the team I root for. But every time he does something, I think, that's great. He's going to be gone. Glad we could help turn it around. And I think part of it, I think the calculus for the Cubs was, most of it was, we don't have to pay him. But part of it was, we'll prove we could do this. And then we'll become the place where players go, we're going to fix you. And we're just going to have a constant stream of this. And it was very reminiscent of, for a while, the Cubs were the team that the kind of middling starting pitcher would come to, and they would make one adjustment, and the guy would become productive and get a big contract somewhere else. And they did it with guys who were not exactly, Paul Maholm. He was the first guy they did it with. He'd been pretty good, Cubs tweaked a couple of things. He had a good year. He got a nice contract. He disappeared into the, wherever.
Right.
They did it with Scott Feldman, which turned out great for them because they turned him into Jake Arrieta and Pedro Strop.
Right.
They did it with Jason Hamill, and then they pushed their luck and they brought Jason back.
Right.
And then I wrote about this in the newsletter. It ended for two reasons. Number one, Brett Anderson signed, and the whole change. This was back before the Pitch Lab. This was Chris Bosio magic, where Boz would look at him and he'd be like, and so he looked at Anderson and he said, you land on your front foot wrong, and it literally makes your head like go, and you don't finish your breaking pitches. And he didn't used to do that, so we're gonna fix that. So they were softening his landing on his front foot, and he didn't like it. He didn't pitch well, and the Cubs ended up releasing him. He had an 8.10 ERA for him, and he basically threw a fit and said the Cubs were trying to ruin him and blah 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 blah. And then it was like 3 years later he went to Oakland and had a good year, and the way they turned him around was they had him land soft on his front foot. But Bosio got launched, and the Cubs turned into this. Oh, we got the Pitch Lab. Our magic cameras will, And I kind of feel like this is the whole thing they're trying to do with Cody, which is we'll prove to other guys that we can salvage their careers. Then we'll just have this constant stream of under market, like one big bat every year, which would be great if you could do it. But you know what would be better? If you actually turned those guys around and you kept some of them. Who knows?
It does sound like something that Crane would be spitballing in a meeting. That undervalue.
Yes. Well, the one last thing, I guess, then we can go, is the Cubs. I have not been all that excited about an Ian Happ extension, for the simple fact that I feel like Ian is a pretty good player, but not a really good player. And I am heartened, I guess, by the fact that since he got his extension, he's played very well. Like that's good. Now that we're stuck with him, he might as well produce. But when they got through spring training and they hadn't worked out a deal, I'm thinking, we dodged a bullet there. Because, if your aspirations are to turn this back into a World Series team, you're going to need to get more out of left field than Ian Happ can give you. So, God bless him. Let him go out on the market after everybody tries to throw money at Shohei, and only one team gets it. He'll get some residual cash.
Yeah.
But anyway, all of a sudden news came out of nowhere that Cubs and Ian were close to getting a deal. And then they signed him to a 3-year contract extension. I just love how short the Cubs extensions are, and they're so excited about it.
Right.
But that ended. I think for the Cubs, that's a really good deal.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't have to give him 5 or 6 years. You only had to give him 3. But the way they announced it cracked me up. So this is all happening. The Cubs have a day game. Word is getting out around noon. Obviously, Cubs start at 1:20. So Ian runs out to the field for the first time, and on the video board they put up a big message that congratulations, Ian Happ signed a 3-year extension. And the fans in left field, were like, hey, they stood up, they gave him a little, whatever. Well, Markey doubled down for his first at bat. Mm-hmm. They gave him the whole treatment where they had Boog and JD lay out. They turned up the field mic. They isolated the PA announcer. Now batting number 8, Ian Happ, and nothing. He got like 4 guys. But the reason I bring this up now is that it just happened to be that was day 3 of celebrating the new lights, the new light bulbs. So Ian gets his at bat, almost grounds into a double play, beats it out. Everybody's very excited. Top of the second, they come back. Crane Kenny sitting in the booth with Boog and JD to talk lights. Very exciting. So they ask him about the Ian Happ extension. And I'm thinking, why are you asking Crane? Right? He's the business guy.
Right.
Don't encourage him. He likes to try to act like he has player, he doesn't. And so in a very Crane way, he says, well, I think we're very excited to have Ian back. He's a great corporate partner. Say, for fuck's sake. Yeah, he's got his coffee and okay, Crane, thanks. Oh, look at the time. You got to go. Oh, I just got here. Never mind. Of course, the thing you have to realize when Boog and JD are interviewing Crane, they're effectively interviewing their boss. Now, he's the boss's boss because they report to the marquee guys, but he's over all that stuff. So they do have to be nice to him, nicer than I would be. But crack me up that, of course, Crane would immediately say, Ian's a corporate partner. Yeah, great.
He's
also the left fielder.
I'm not sure how the obvious shirts work. Could we get an obvious shirt that says something to that effect for Ian? Great corporate partner.
Ian Happ is a great corporate partner. You could. I think their only Ian Happ shirt right now is Ian Happ makes my coffee. Which, there's a lot of obvious shirts that I just can't imagine anybody buys.
Right.
And that's one of them. But I've seen people in them, which is like, really?
Right.
Yeah. I guess Joe understands his business better than I do, but there's a lot of shit that he prints that I imagine that when there's an earthquake in Guatemala, next time they show the beach there, its kids are going to be in their Ian Happ makes my coffee shirts. So, All right. Well, it's glad to have baseball back underway. For those of us who are Cub fans, it's very nice to have a team that's not getting their ass kicked every day.
Sure.
That's always good to talk to you.
Same here.
Well, thanks, Andy.
Many of us have herpes.